Welcome,
Yeah.
everybody. Welcome to our Workflow Pivot Ready Live session today. Shout out to those who join us weekly. Jackson, I know that you're a keen fan of these. If you're listening, just a shout out from our side. Anybody else, welcome. If you have missed some of our previous episodes, they're on our Facebook page. Amy and I are on the Workflow side. Amy runs operations, and I'm on the servicing side. We're bringing these to you just to talk a little bit about what it is that we do. Over the last couple of weeks, we spoke about structure, how to structure a service-based company. What are some of the divisional role titles that you need? What are the functions? What are the leadership profiles that you need for that? Last week, we had Dirk on the call. So we spoke a little bit about growth and the mindset around growth. Before that, we had operations, and we started off with servicing. So please feel free to go have a look at those. And then today, Amy's got some questions prepped for us today, and we'll talk about some interesting mindset stuff. So, Amy, over to you.
Awesome. Okay, so I just got through telling Wesley that today's a little random, but I think it's a good time to kind of take a breather. And I read an article this week. I had to Google it today because I don't do math very well, but there is exactly 88 days left in 2022.
Wow.
Which means there's less than that till Christmas, just in case you needed that little heads up. Start thinking.
Oh, wow.
But so I was thinking about that, and I know, Wesley, we have talked about our journals in the past. I personally am a fan of, I keep the quarterly execution with my goals. I went to the mountains last week, and while I was gone and unplugged, I spent some time writing my journal, quarterly goals for this quarter, what it's going to look like. And then yesterday, as a team, we spent some time going through what our quarter execution is. What does it look like to bring 2022 to a solid close? So I want to talk a little bit about that today, but I also want to remind you that this is also a good time to start thinking about 2023, because 88 days is going to go by in the blink of an eye, and you're going to be into next year already. And so, the first thing I want to start with, Wesley, is celebrating wins. So what does it look like from a quarterly execution standpoint to actually look back and celebrate your wins, both personally and as a company or a team?
So if you look at how humans are wired, people like to know that, in business, we measure our business. It's growing year over year. So you get your P&L statement, you get your year over year statement, you look at your growth, your market share, all those type of things. You have to be able in your own life. So let's start with personal, is you have to set personal goals, and you know how to celebrate them. Because winning it's one of those things that becomes habitual. If you are able to win in one space, you'll tell your mind in another space, hey, I overcame this challenge. I've got forward momentum. I can overcome a challenge somewhere else. The same is true on the business side as well. If you can't stop and celebrate the wins within your company, it's very easy for us as business owners to fall victim to, okay, what's next? Okay, what's next? Okay, what's next? And there's no sense of celebration. There's no sense of camaraderie or community that gets built to say, you know what, Amy, you and I set out to do this in Q3. We accomplished that goal. If you're constantly looking up the mountain, that's all you're doing, is you're just seeing this uphill climb you have all the time. So it can become very demoralizing for people to always just say, okay, never mind what you did. That was an expectation. Not, good or bad, big or small. You have set some ambitious goals for this quarter. You need to be able to celebrate them. And one of the things where I see this inability to celebrate wins is people don't fully understand the benefit of putting those mile markers in front of you. I was talking to a business owner recently, and they're up against the ceiling in their life, but they've got enough resources to fulfill their needs on this side. And so reward can show up on this side of the challenge. Yet they want to break through the ceiling, but they keep rewarding themselves for staying on this side of the challenge. If you're able to say, okay, if I grow my business by 100,000 or 1,000,000, whatever it is, just because you can afford to do something right now doesn't mean you should. What you should do is say, when I hit this goal, I'm going to reward myself. You can go buy that boat. You might have enough money to go and buy that boat right now. It's less gratifying just because you can, versus saying, you know what, I'm going to set a goal for myself, because then you start using those positive affirmations in your life to start setting goals to overcome challenges. The thing that limits people from breaking through ceilings is blind spots. They don't know they're up against the ceiling, or it's a lack of motivation to break through that. And the very obvious thing that every single person has is there's some things that I want. There's some sense of reward. You said, hey, I went to the mountains last week. You can set that as a reward for yourself. You can celebrate a win to say, I successfully completed Q3. I'm going to take, a couple of days and go hang around the mountain with my husband. That's a reward that you set for yourself for breaking through that ceiling.
I think too, I was thinking about this, and it was funny because you just said on some of our coaching calls today, like you feel like the energy is kind of dipping. It's becoming that time of year. And we always use that phrase, like that time of year. And I had this realization personally a few years ago that about the time October comes, I'm so burned out from working. Like, and it's everything. Like, it's working at work, but it's also like I'm burnt out because I've been working out so much. I've been eating healthy for 3/4 of the year. Like, you have all of these things and you start the year so motivated, and then you do it consistently. Like, at some point it's exhausting. And then I would always fall off at the end of the year. And it was just like, I don't care anymore. I need a break. And the mindset shift for me was the two things. It was one, finding the wins. A lot of times we get to this time of year and it's like, oh my gosh, there's so much we still have left to do in the next 88 days that it's overwhelming. And we forget to think about what all we have actually accomplished over the past 9 months. But then also breaking it into that quarterly more execution of where you're just looking at like, okay, what am I going to do strong right now, and staying strong for 3 months. And then, like you said, like plan a break in there or plan a reward, whatever that looks like for you on a regular basis, so that this time of year, I think, is just really hard because it gets really busy with so many things, but also like there's so much stuff to keep doing.
Yeah. And the thing for me is, I see this with business owners. They, as you say, they push hard for 9 months, and then they either surrender to, I'm never going to hit my goals for the year anyway. So, I'm gonna start again next year. I'm just gonna maintain. I'm just gonna flatline for the last quarter, instead of breaking it into quarterly goals, because then it's not a year-long objective, it's a quarterly objective, and you can build in those rewards. Because if you're only building the reward in year after year after year, it becomes very long for people to go without that sense of achievement. So I see a lot of businesses, push really hard and they get to Q4. So you have two choices when you get to Q4. And I give this advice to all my clients is you have the choice to say, how am I going to end this year surviving just so that I don't go bankrupt? Or how am I going to finish this year strong? What are the things that I'm going to do in Q4 so that I don't repeat the cycle next year? So you can use Q4 to meet the Q4 objective. And for a lot of companies, one of the things that we talk about is having a business planning clinic, having a plan around if I do this in Q4, what is it going to allow me to do in 2023? How am I setting myself up to finish this year strong? And again, it doesn't have to be year on year. You don't want to fall into that new year mindset, New Year's resolution, but you also want to know I'm finishing strong and building on that for the next year. So set some real goals that you say, okay, if I'm going to have a great 2023, what do I need to do to set myself up? Otherwise, you're just going to slide down the ladder, start January at the bottom of the ladder again, and work your way up, hoping to overcome the challenge.
I think that's an interesting point too, like, because you talked about, I don't want to fall into the New Year's resolution crowd, but the thing that people forget is the new year is a new year because of natural cycles. So as a business owner, if you close your books at the end of the actual calendar year, then the new year is a new year. If you close your book and you run more on a fiscal year, you might change to a different kind of new year setting. But for most people, the new year happens because it's also just as a human nature, like we go through the winter and like, people take summer vacations and then they settle back into a routine, and then the holidays come and then we get back into a routine. And there's just this natural cycle that happens that this time of year is a really good time to take stock. Like you said, from a business perspective, like, what did we do? What is next year going to look like? But I think also taking stock from a personal perspective, what did you spend some time over the next few months looking at how the business did, looking at how your life interacted with the business, looking at where you won personally or where you failed personally, and what is that next year going to look like, and how are you going to successfully plan for the next year, and start mapping that out so that when the next year comes, you're not just like, you're not the New Year's resolution crowd that you wake up and decide I'm going to lose 30 pounds, but you already know what it's going to be. And that's how you really execute and are successful overall.
So I want to share my screen. If it shows something, let me just make sure I'm sharing the right screen. Yes, you don't need to see my busy calendar. So if we look at an experience, so New Year's resolution, Q4 goals, annual goal for the year, setting yourself up for 2023. The same applies to all of that. Is what am I experiencing? So we talked about celebrating a success. Okay, what are we celebrating? Okay, we finished Q3 up over last year. All right, so what does that actually mean now that you've hit that goal? And for me, it is, how does this affect the business? So this can go either way, whether it's a good experience or a bad experience. How does it affect the business? And then the most important thing is, now what? I've gotten feedback from my business. I have succeeded, or I have not succeeded, or I need to change strategy, or I made a great hire, or I signed a big contract. Now what? For me, the now what is, how do I not repeat the negative experience that I have by changing? You first assess, good or bad. How does it affect the business, and how do I react to it? But not react from a reactionary point of view. Is you become proactive on understanding that. And it's not making a New Year's resolution and say, oh, next year I'm not going to make a bad hire. What you're saying is, next year I'm making a good hire. So in order for me to make a good hire, I need to have very clear expectations on what success looks like. So I don't want another repeat of building myself up for failure by not achieving a goal. So being able to assess an experience, review the activity or the process and the experience. How does this affect your team? How does it affect your business? How does it affect your personal life, your marriage? So interpret this experience and gain insight. and then help ways to use and learn from that. What have we learned, and now go and fix it. So one of the big things, thanks to me, you can cut the share screen, is the one of the big things that I see is a lot of people, they repeat the same mistake over and over and over. So I was talking to one of our groups today just about quarterly evaluations, having cadence around quarterly evaluations. And it's always nice when we do these quarterly evaluations, we can talk about, hey, Amy, I'm your team leader. I'm doing your quarterly evaluation, and I'm getting insight into where you're struggling. But the other side of that is, if we use the same model, what is the information telling me? Well, Amy's also telling me that, hey, Wesley, I think you failed as a divisional leader in this instance. Okay, so how do we interpret that data, and how do I not repeat that? Or if it's a good experience, what did I do correctly? I mean, I spoke to a client earlier that signed a $100,000 contract. It doesn't just fall into your lap. Something came about that brought that into existence. So what caused that? What can we learn? Okay, don't chase, the little deals. Maybe look at some of the bigger deals in addition to some of the smaller deals. Okay, now let's build a strategy to go and look for bigger deals. So for me, it follows that same cycle all the time. And the thing about the quarterly evals is, if you have a successful feedback loop in your company, am I hearing that I'm the bottleneck quarter after quarter after quarter? And I'm hoping that my business goes to the next level, but I'm not being that change. As the saying goes, be the change you want to see. And if I'm just saying, hey, Amy, I need you to do better, I need you to overcome these obstacles, but you know what? I have these limitations and you must just work around them. Then I'm failing at becoming a better leader. I'm failing at becoming a better person. I'm failing at becoming a better business owner, because I'm not working on myself. I'm just asking other people to plug the holes. And the same way that I will expect you to improve as somebody that, hypothetically reports to me, is I also need to improve as a leader. I also need to step up and say, I have become a better leader. And that starts by being the leader that people can respond to. So,
and I think this feedback loop, Wesley, is the difference between strategy and goals, because you set your strategy first, and that is just like you were just talking about, take the data you're given and decide, what are we going to do the same? What are we going to do different? What is that going to look like moving forward? Based off of that strategy, you're always working towards a constant vision. Based off of that strategy, then you go in and you set your goals to follow the strategy. And so, and the data feedback is constantly important. You can't make decisions if you don't have data to take it off of.
And and that's why I brought it up, because I think a lot of people get to the end of the quarter and they say, well, these are all the things that went wrong this year. And they forget that there's a positive feedback, and that comes back to our opening conversation around celebrating wins. If you're not able to look back in the last 9 months and say, hey, we went from this to this, just because it's done, it kind of gets, lost in the fold. It's like, well, we're now used to doing 100,000 a month. That's the new norm. It's like, no, you know how hard we had to work to get there? So if we don't celebrate that, the only thing that's going to happen when we hit 100 is, hey, the new goal is 200. Keep going. And there's no opportunity for that feedback loop to give positive affirmation, to provide energy back into it. I know entrepreneurs and business owners are very apt at pushing really hard, but you have to understand the people that work for you or in your company. You have to understand that they don't have the same benefits that you have as a company owner. So you might be able to, you went to the mountains last week. As a business owner, you can go to the mountains for 3 months. You can do that if you want, if you're the business owner. if you build a business that can live independently from you. But I can't do that. I'm the service leader in the company. I can't just up and leave for 3 months. So I also need some sort of way of saying, hey, we've actually celebrated a win. We've actually improved a system. We were talking about systems and processes earlier on. We've actually built a process. We've never had a process. We've built a process. A little thing like that. How do we onboard a client? How do we service a client? How do we finish the job site? How do we invoice a client? I used to do it all by myself on the back of a cardboard box. Now I actually have software. So let's celebrate the fact that we're not doing that anymore. I spoke to a client yesterday in the power washing industry, a fairly young business owner, and he said, you know what? I see these other power washing companies, and these guys go out and they measure the yard. And he said, I got some software that's dirt cheap, and I go around the property and I scan the property, and it takes me 6 minutes to give a 99% accurate estimate on the property. The other guy goes home and still does it with an abacus. This guy has software and he does it within 6 minutes, and it's real. So there are little things. If you set those little wins, it's like, hey, how do we take our estimation from a 30-minute process to a 20-minute process? It's a little thing, but all those little things add up. And that's where we come back to the feedback loop. What are we doing correctly? How's it improving the business? And how do we build on that success?
I think I want to circle back to something you said about pouring energy back into not just the company, but also the employees. And so I heard this strange strategy yesterday, and I will upfront say I don't necessarily know how it's possible, but maybe that's just me. But they were talking about the 8-8-8 rule, and the thought behind it was you should sleep for 8 hours a night, work for 8 hours a day, and that leaves you 8 hours for you to do whatever you want to do. I don't sleep for 8 hours a night, and I don't work for 8 hours a day, but I don't know what the time breaks down. But I did find it interesting as a business owner, if you look at your employees in kind of that structure, like how much time are you leaving for just giving them their energy back? How much are you expecting from them? How much are you rewarding them? How much are you celebrating their wins? How much are you reviving their energy? It doesn't necessarily have to be, I went to the mountains last week and I answered my phone the entire time I was there. And I'm totally fine with that because it was just as rejuvenating to me and it was totally great. But maybe it's like a day off here and there or, whatever that looks like. So I'm curious your thoughts.
And I've heard that, and I've listened to a couple of people who say, hey, they run 3 days in their life, and again, whether it's sustainable or not. The two things I want to mention: one, as a business owner, if you're fatigued, if you're getting into that Q4 burned out mindset, you cannot think that you're the only one in the company that's feeling that way. Just because you pay someone else a salary doesn't mean that they don't have the same symptoms. They're running the race alongside you. So if you're burned out, they're probably burned out as well. So if you're not purposely creating these rest stops, these places for them to rejuvenate, and to your point to the 8-8-8 is, I think most people live in their mind, they live like that, but they kind of run, not concurrently like we think they should. They run simultaneously. So you know what, I'm pushing hard for 2 hours, I take an hour lunch, I push hard for another 3 hours, I go to my kids' football game for 2 hours, I push another 3 hours, and I sleep 8 hours. So it is still broken out into the 8-8-8. But the work environment for people who work in your company maybe it's not as easy to do the 888 straight, but as a business owner, you might be able to engineer your world that way. You might be able to say, you know what? If I can block 8 hours of personal time, I mean, you do this in the morning. You get up quite early. You go to gym. You take Sky, your beautiful dog, for a walk every morning. You cook dinner for your husband every night, that type of stuff. You guys cook together. So you still have those 8 hours. They're just broken up. And the same with sleep. If sleep is broken up like that, it kind of doesn't really serve a purpose. That's why they say you've got to sleep continuously for a period. And the same with celebrating wins. If you're just saying, hey, Amy, great job with building that system. By the way, I need 4 more built. It's kind of like living on takeaways. There's no real substance. There's no real value to it. Instead of saying, you know what, Amy, I know that I'm asking a lot of you, but if you get this done, have 2 days in the, on where you can go away with, your husband on his fishing trip and go to the mountains. So the question that I pose then is, how can I serve you in getting that? We've both set the reward, and I'm expecting you to deliver the result, but I'm also asking you, how can I serve you to get there? How can I get you to that reward point? Not just, hey, you're out on your own, go and do it. If you do it, you get the reward. If you don't do it, you're going to get a hiding. It's not that black or white. People don't, and again, people face personal stuff. People face challenges. People go through personal stuff. I mean, we know this. Dirk went through something personally in his life. He had a house fire. So there are things in our personal life that affect us. And we can't just say, well, these are the rules that we play by. We only do 888. I think it works in a perfect scenario. It works if it's a very controlled environment. But somewhere in between, I mean, I was talking to a client this morning, someone in the house got a stomach bug, and then all of a sudden all 4 of them had a stomach bug and we're down for 5 days. So I think in principle it works really well. But if you're growing a business, you don't have the luxury of saying, hey, I'm only answer that phone tomorrow. I'm only going to do that estimate tomorrow.
Yeah, and I definitely think for me, the takeaway of it is, like, I just know I don't need 8 hours of sleep. Like, and I don't think it has to be that structured, but the takeaway is definitely making sure you personally and also your employees have time that is not eaten up by work, have, time to go do their hobbies, time to go spend with their family, all of that stuff, and making sure there's awareness around that. So Jake wrote this question in for you, Wesley. How do you celebrate wins personally for you and your team?
So for me personally, and for my team, so I like doing stuff. I'm an adventurous guy. So when I set a goal, I say, hey, I want to do this. I normally go out on some adventurous thing. So I'll build a bike and do what's called a BR, back road discovery route, so where you off-road on a motorcycle with some friends. So I know that I'm working towards that reward. I know that I have, I'm working with my friends. So my personal time I spend actually building this bike with my friends, and we each building a bike so that we can go on this reward. But it helps me distinguish in my mind, when I work, and when I play. I do both very hard. So when I work hard, and when I play hard. And for me, celebrating a win is having clear expectations of what a win looks like. We often have this discussion where we say, okay, we've got 10 things to do, and we resolve 2 of them. It's the very easy thing to do is, what about the other 8? And it was like, well, we can't discard the fact that we've already done 2. And it's easy for business owners to say, all I'm doing is I'm focusing on these 8 big things that are left. And people need to step up onto a place of strength, and they need to step up and say, you know what, I'm actually feeling successful. Jake, who we know that I know personally, is, hey, I used to do this. Now I've taken on a personal hobby. So you know what? If I hit these goals, I'm going to reward myself. Just because I can reward myself right now, delayed gratification becomes a lot more motivating, because you know what, I actually know why I'm rewarding myself. If I just, an example of that is a cheat day. I know that you and your husband are quite healthy eaters. So
We don't have
if you
cheat
just
days.
you don't have cheat days, but I'm a little bit on the other side. I live on cheat days, and then I have these healthy days where I reward myself for cheating for 5 days. Just joking. So you can build those in. It's true in when people train. It's true when people run a business. It's true when you have a family. I've got kids at school, and I tell them, hey, if you hit a certain grade, this is the reward that comes. So they're learning to work towards something, as opposed to just assuming it's going to be there all the time. And also, it shows people that you're aware of their wins. I don't care what your psychometric profiling is. Everybody wants to know that they're winning.
I think that's, I was reading a book last night, actually, and they were talking about celebrating wins, and it can look different for everybody on your team. And that's a really important thing to keep in mind. I think the example they used was, some people like public appreciation, and you're in a team meeting and you high five and you congratulate somebody and you're cheering them on, and you're celebrating a win very publicly. And for some people, that's really embarrassing and they don't like it. And so by you doing that for that second person, it's not celebrating them. Like, it's not. So I think becoming, especially when you're talking about wins of your team, what that looks like. You mentioned your kids, and I know one of your boys gets paid for good grades, but if the other boy isn't really motivated by money, you have to find a different way to reward him for the work. And so those kind of things, it's a very individualized thing, and it can be like, as a team, we're going to celebrate this way, but don't forget to give each person their kind of individualized attention that they need in a way that it's going to feel like an actual win for them as well.
So I was just looking up as you were talking. There's a saying I came across. It says, "Modern slaves are not in chains; they're in debt." And I think, and I think a lot of that is true in business. If I don't know how to celebrate a win, I'm always indebted on the next win. So for me, it's not going to feel like, hey, I've got this freedom, I enjoy what I do, because I'm always working for not what you've done and successfully done today, it's what's next. So I'm always indebted in this slavery on, I owe you another success. I owe the business another success. Yes, that comes. But if there's no relationship between ground gained and the road ahead, it'll just feel like you're treading mud all the time. And I can't think that it's possible for anybody. I know for me personally, it's not. I purposely try and acknowledge the wins of those around me. A little thing like, Amy will write a process, and I'll reply and say, hey, process well written. It's a little thing, and just to acknowledge that process is well written, it's structured enough. This is what we do. So I cannot underscore the value of celebrating wins enough. Yeah.
And I will give you kudos to that, Wesley. You're very good at that. And I, on the other hand, it is a downside of me personally that I don't recognize my own wins very well, let alone the wins of other people. And so that's something that I just really have to think about. And to Jake's question, for me personally, like, I have to think about what it actually looks like to celebrate a win, because oftentimes I'm moving so fast. Like, if I accomplish something, is that really a win for me, or is that just a check off the to-do list? And there's been a lot of work that I've had to do around that lately, just around, like, taking a breath even. That sometimes that's the biggest win I can celebrate. It's just taking a breath and taking a beat to chill and, look at, and again, to me, for someone like me, that cadence around like what have we accomplished over the past quarter, over the past year, and like looking at what has happened is a huge deal, because if not, I don't look back and think of all the things I've done. I'm just looking at all the things that have to be done still.
And I mean, I want to, talk about that again. If you hypothetically as an individual cannot celebrate the wins of the people around you, how attractive do you think you're going to be as a person? Because every time you're in conversation with people, it's always like, don't worry about what you did already. Let's focus on what you're doing now. So you constantly, when you show up in someone's conversation who's like that, you always feel like, I'm not doing enough. I'm not enough. I'm not fulfilling the role enough. Imagine your spouse, every time you cook dinner, it's like, well, you could have cooked it better. Or you know what? Hey, babe, I cleaned the house. It's like, well, I found some dust behind the TV. Next time just put in a little bit of extra. So what about, did you clean the underside of the carpet? You constantly feel like, damn it, I'm missing the ball on this. So being able to stop and celebrate wins, I mean, there's plenty of books around that and the psychological benefit of that. So, and again, I mean, that brings us to the other topic. I think in order for you to see the change, if you want other people to be that way, it starts with you being that person. So one of the things that I came across that for me illustrates this the best is, when I talk to business owners, they say, hey, I just hired this person, they're in a growth position. And they came to me and they said, well, when I have the title as growth leader, or when I have a really good growth person, then the business will do really well. And then we'll have all the money and the resources we need to grow the business. And that leads to just stagnation, because to our point is you're constantly living on that future gratification. When I have this, you see this a lot with people say, when I retire, I'm going to enjoy my life. When I find the perfect partner, I'm going to be happy. When I buy a new car. So they're constantly living in the future. Then they will do the things that they enjoy, and then they will have the joy that comes with it. So it leads to stagnation, because you're constantly living in a place of emptiness. If you look at the model correctly, it's be, do, have. What must I be? I must be the leader that inspires other people. I must be the person that other people like being around. I must be the person that acknowledges the wins of others. So what must I do to influence those around me? Is I must stop and say, Amy, you did a great job there. Hey, Amy, why don't you just take 2 days off? You're actually getting on the team's nerve. We're not going to tell you that, but why don't you just take 2 days off? We think you need it. It's actually us that need it. So what must I do to be that person so that I can have? You can't live in this, when I have, I will do, then I'll be mindset. It's very regressive. You're constantly saying, well, when we have all our processes, then we'll do everything correctly, and then we'll have a big business. It's like, no. I don't have a growth person today. I must be growth person. That means I must stick to the KPIs that we've set, so that I have enough clients coming in, so that I have my systems worked out around how do we attract a client. Whether that's a power washing company, a solar company, a manufacturing company, it doesn't really matter. It's you have to follow. I have to be the change I want to see. I need to be the change in the business. I need to be the change as a leader. I can't just use the quarterly feedback and say, you know what, Amy, this is what you need to work on next quarter. I need to be the leader that you're aspiring. Say, you know what, every time I'm in a meeting with my divisional leader or the company owner, I'm so inspired to say, you know what, we celebrated successfully, moving ahead. I'm looking forward to the next celebration.
Yeah.
So any thoughts that you have on be, do, have?
Well, I think the thing that came to mind and I jotted down is we have a saying in Workflow a lot of times that it starts with you and it accelerates with them, meaning we train people around people systems. That is our specialty. We focus on teams, we focus on hiring people, but the reality of that conversation is you can hire the best people for the most money. I'm a huge college football fan, and the Nebraska athletic director last week or a couple weeks ago when they fired their head coach came out and said, I have all the money at my disposal. I will hire the best coach that money can buy me, and I don't care how much it costs me. Well, guess what? You can hire the best person, but if you as a leader don't have what it takes to lead that person, all the money in the world is not going to get you anywhere. And so I know today was a little bit of a like random conversation, but I think really to kind of sum it all up is this. It starts with you and all of these things that you need in place to inspire, to lead, to be successful. All of these things, like you have to embody that first and foremost. And then you have to take that in a strategy, like we talked about earlier, into an executable plan and lead your team through it so that you can have success, whatever success looks like for you, whether it's a $5 million company or whether it's 5 months of vacation. It starts with you. And if you don't have those pieces in place first, whether you're a CEO or an owner or an executive leader or you're just an assistant working in the business, like you can lead up, and all of that success starts with you and who you are and your mindset.
Yeah. So, I mean, looking at that feedback loop that we spoke about earlier on, is your business is going to give you feedback, whether it is KPIs, whether it is your quarterly evaluations, it is what are you going to do with that information? So when we look at the Be Do Have model, is a lot of people say, well, I will be happy once this happens. And to, the point that you just made is you can't say, I'm going to be a good leader when I have good people that follow me. You have to be a good leader today so that good people will follow you. You can't say, you know what, when I lose all this weight, I'm going to be a healthy person. It's like, no, I'm going to eat healthy today so that I can become a healthy person. It is you do the work and then it materializes. You can't wait for the manifestation and then which results in the actualization, which is, oh, now I am happy. Now I am successful. Now I have a big business. You have to start with Be Do Have. So that's it. That's what we got for you guys today. Thank you, everybody. Jake, Jackson, if you guys are still there, thanks for jumping in on the comment section. If you guys have any questions, you want to reach out to us, you're welcome to reach us at contact@bergflow.com. We'll be back next week with another great episode hosted by Amy. She's doing a great job. Thank you, Amy, for being so committed to making sure that we deliver this content. We're getting really good feedback. We want to invite you guys, if you want to talk to us specifically about your business, if you want to schedule a strategy session, reach out to us on that email address. We'll get you set up. You can have an hour of our time. We'll talk through your business, see where some of the bottlenecks are, what are some of the bigger obstacles you need to overcome to get your business to that next level. So thank you guys for spending. Amy, thank you for hosting.
All right. We'll see you next week.